3645 BBY. Jedi Knight Zoe Trace wakes inside what she assumes to be a ship. The room she was in appeared to be a trophy room, the walls covered in skulls, skins, and hides of animals long dead. The ceiling was equally gross, infested with moss, mildew, and mold. Zoe was on the ship of a Wifid who kidnapped her. But why was she kidnapped, you might ask? Not for her, but for the plant she alone knows to care for, the Murakami orchid, better known as the black orchid. It's a force-sensitive plant used in several Sith alchemy recipes. The Wifid took Zoe to the planet Odasar Fastin. Here, the Sith Lord Darth Scabros intended to gain eternal life. He worked in a lab on top of a massive tower that overlooked the planet's snowy, barren landscape. So, of course, that is the tower where Zoe was taken. The lab Darth Scabros researched in was a dark, gloomy lab, and was filled with devices capable of unspeakable horrors. Darth Scabros himself stood in the center of the lab, dressed in black, face gaunt, eyes hollow. Just standing in the room with him, Zoe felt her knees go weak as she struggled to keep her composure. Behind the Sith Lord was a cage with a Sith apprentice inside. How he got there is up to you to think of, but I promise it was not willingly. His body was covered in thin, clear tubes. A thick, ghastly liquid seeped through these tubes towards the Sith apprentice, drowning him from the inside out. The apprentice screamed, beating himself. To save himself or kill himself, I do not know, but it was to no avail. Silently and expressionless, Scabros took the black orchid and dropped it into the tubes. It rushed with the liquid to invade the apprentice's body. The moment the orchid reached him, he clenched up, then went limp. All could see he was dead, and that is how the plague started. A moment later, the dead apprentice stood up. What was once a boy was now a monster. His skin had turned gray, his movement unhuman. He screamed an eerie call that rattled everyone within a mile down to the bone. His lips wrinkled back into a yellow grin, and he exploded out of the cage. Darth Scabros smiled at his creation, but he wouldn't be for long. The undead monster leaped at the Sith Lord, sinking its teeth deep into Scabros' cheek. Scabros never screamed, but the terror in his eyes showed enough. Nevertheless, Scabros hit the monster and it fell out of the window. But the damage was done. Just like the apprentice, Scabros was turning into a wild animal, an uncontrollable monster. Zoe ran, of course. I would have as well. The undead monsters had no logic, no reason. Their only goal was to feed, and by feeding they would spread the sickness that had turned them unhuman. There was no hope for anyone on their own. The Sith are selfish, as you may know, so when they learned of this sickness spreading across the planet, they didn't team up for survival. It was everybody for themselves. They threw their fellow Sith at the monsters in hope of surviving. They hid and fought on their own so nobody else would threaten their survival. But there was no hope for anyone on their own, and eventually every Sith on Odasar Fastin was converted. Zoe herself had next to no help. The only person who came for her was her brother, and he too was overtaken by the undead monsters. So, as you may have guessed, Zoe and the Wifid had to work together to survive. How they survived is beyond me, and it's a quite gruesome story really, but they did survive. Or rather, one did. I couldn't imagine what it was like on that planet. The undead monsters chasing you across the planet, their bodies covered in bite marks. If they bit you, you were done for. And you couldn't kill them either, since they already were dead. And the ghostly screams, chilling you from the inside out, making you want to curl into a ball and cry until you meet your doom. But after an eternity of narrow escapes from the monster, Zoe and the Wifid made it back to the ship they came on. They escaped on this ship, but as they rose from the surface of the planet, the Wifid could feel himself turning into the monster. What happened will remain a mystery. Perhaps one of the undead bit him without him knowing. Perhaps an animal had contracted the sickness and infected him. But whatever the case, he had the sickness. To protect the galaxy from the sickness, Zoe pushed him out of the ship and back onto the planet. and thus Zoe was the only survivor from Otisar Faston. She's the only reason I'm able to tell you this story. It's been centuries since this event, yet it is still a quarantined planet. There's a blockade around this planet by the Republic, and anyone who tries to enter or leave the planet gets shot down. I hear stories, though, from officers serving on that blockade. They swear that, sometimes, they can still hear the screams of the undead monsters begging for more prey.